Today, the State Council Information Office is having this press conference to release the white paper, China, Democracy That Works, and to brief you on what is in the white paper and also take your questions. We have with us at today's press conference Mr. Xu Ling, Vice Minister of the Publicity Department of the CPC Central Committee, Minister of State Council Information Office, Mr. Xu Youshen, Vice Minister of the United Front Work Department of the CPC Central Committee, Mr. Tian Peiyan, Deputy Director of the Policy Research Office of the CPC Central Committee, Mr. Guo Zhenhua, Deputy Secretary General of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, Mr. Hu Henlu, Head of the Research Department of the General Office of the CPPCC National Committee, and Mr. Wang Aiwen, Vice Minister of Civil Affairs. Now I give the floor to Mr. Xi. Ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, good morning. Democracy is the common value of humanity and an ideal that has always been cherished by the Communist Party of China and the Chinese people. This year marks the centenary of the CPC. Over the past century, the CPC has held high the banner of people's democracy, led the people to become masters of their country, who hold in their hands their own future and that of society and the country. Since the 18th Party Congress, the CPC has put forth the CPC with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core has put forth and vigorously advanced the important concept of whole process people's democracy, translating the concept of democracy into methodical and effective institutional arrangements and concrete practices. The whole process people's democracy is brimming with vitality across China. Today, the State Council's Information Office is releasing the white paper, China, Democracy That Works. This is an important document that gives a systemic overview of China's democracy, including the value, the concept, the institutions, the system, participation, practices, achievements, and the contributions. The white paper pointed out that the whole process people's democracy has integrated process-oriented democracy with results-oriented democracy, procedural democracy with substantive democracy, direct democracy with indirect democracy, and people's democracy with the will of the state. It is a model of socialist democracy that covers all aspects of the democratic process and all sectors of society. It is a true socialist democracy that works. The white paper contains a preamble, the main content, and a conclusion. The main content includes whole process people's democracy under CPC leadership, a sound institutional framework, concrete and pragmatic practices, democracy that works, and a new model of democracy. altogether 5 parts. Well, these 5 aspects clearly demonstrate that China's whole process, people's democracy, is a clear concept reflected in reality. It involves institutional procedures and concrete practices. It has promoted China's development and enriched humanity's political civilization. It is a democratic system that combines historical, theoretical, and practical logics into an organic whole. First, China's democracy is a whole process people's democracy, where the people run the country. China's democracy is people's democracy. People running the country is the essence and the core of China's democracy. The white paper reviewed the history of how the party led the people in promoting democracy in the periods of the New Democratic Revolution, the Socialist Revolution, and construction, and the new period of reform, opening up, and the socialist modernization. The white paper also shows that since its 18th National Congress, the party has led the people in actively promoting the whole process people's democracy. And China's democratic development has entered a new historical period. The Chinese people are more confident about their democracy, and China's democracy enjoys ever broader prospects. The white paper pointed out that the whole process people's democracy is a great creation by the CPC, which rallied the people to pursue, develop, and realize democracy. It is the crystallization of the party's experience in promoting innovation in the theories, systems, and practices of China's democracy. The white paper emphasized that the history of the CPC's endeavors is one about how it rallied and led the people in exploring, forming, and developing the whole process people's democracy. Second, China's democracy has methodical and effective institutional arrangements. In China, the various state systems are built around the concept of people running the country, which also determines how the state governance system operates. The whole process, people's democracy, has full-fledged institutions and procedures. China's system is a people's democratic dictatorship which organically integrates democracy into the system and ensures that it is the people who run the country. It has adopted a political system of people's congresses where the people effectively exercise the power of the state. China upholds and keeps improving the system of multi-party cooperation and political consultation under the leadership of the CPC, which effectively avoided the problems of indecisiveness and inaction, the lack of supervision, and vicious competition among parties. China cements and develops the broadest patriotic united front and continues to improve relations between political parties, ethnicities, religious beliefs, social groups, and Chinese at home and abroad. China upholds and improves the system of regional ethnic autonomy, which ensures solidarity and unification of the country and allows all ethnicities to jointly run the country. China upholds and improves the system of primary-level self-governance by the people, promotes primary-level democracy, and allows the people to manage, serve, educate, and supervise themselves. The white paper pointed out that these institutions and procedures form a comprehensive, broad, and organically linked institutional system that enables the people to run the country. Diverse, smooth, and orderly channels for democracy have been established to effectively ensure that the party's proposition, the will of the state, and that of the people are integrated, and that people can exercise their rights and run the country. Third, China's democracy involves concrete and pragmatic practices. The white paper pointed out if the people are only awakened to cast their votes and then go into hibernation after the vote, if the people can hear high-sounding slogans only during the election campaigns and have no say after elections, if the people are quoted only for their votes and are cast aside after the election, then such democracy is not true democracy. China develops a whole process people's democracy, which has full-fledged systems and procedures, as well as thorough participation from the people and concrete practices. The whole process people's democracy combines electoral democracy and consultative democracy and runs through the entire process from democratic election to consultation, decision-making, management, and supervision, all of which are democratic. It covers all aspects, including economy, politics, culture, society, ecological conservation. It pays attention to the development of the country, the difficulties in social governance, and people's daily lives, so that people's will and voice will be reflected in all aspects of the country's political and social life, thus effectively preventing over-promising during political campaigns and under-delivering after elections. Fourth, China's democracy is a broad-based, true democracy that works. The white paper pointed out that democracy is not for decoration, it's not for show. It is for resolving the issues and problems people need resolving. The full-fledged institutions and procedures, and also thorough participation and practices, allow the whole process people's democracy to move from a concept to a form of system, governance mechanism, and the people's way of life that have taken roots across China. In China, all powers of the state belong to the people, who enjoy extensive rights. In China, people's sense of fulfillment, happiness, and security keeps rising. Human rights are fully respected and effectively guaranteed. In China, people's democratic participation has been expanding. People's interests and aspirations can be smoothly communicated and effectively realized. The white paper pointed out that a good democracy ensures good governance and promotes national development. It would be preposterous and impossible for a country with failed and inefficient governance and piles of domestic problems to have a democracy that is the sample of the world. Good democracy should be able to pull consensus rather than creating social division and conflicts. It should uphold social equity and justice rather than ossifying social classes and interests. It should keep the society stable and orderly instead of bringing turbulence and chaos. It should fill the society with positive energy for the good and the beautiful, not negative energy of the false, the evil, and the ugly. China's democracy has boosted the development of the country and promoted social development and delivered happiness to the people. It is high-quality democracy. The white paper also emphasized that practices and the people are the best judge of whether a form of democracy works. Fifth, China's democracy has enriched people's or humanity's political civilization. The 1.4 billion plus Chinese people, or nearly 1/5 of the world's population, have become the true masters of their country and enjoyed extensive rights and freedoms. This provides a new pathway for exploring humanity's cause of democracy and contributed Chinese wisdom to humanity's political civilization. The white paper pointed out that China's whole process, people's democracy based on its national conditions, has distinct Chinese features and reflects humanity's common pursuit of democracy. There is more than one way to realize democracy. It can't all be the same. The garden of humanity's political civilization boasts so much colors and richness because of the great diversity among different civilizations. Judging other countries with one's own yardstick, or even forcing other countries to copy their own political system and democratic model, is anti-democratic. It will find no support and is doomed to fail. The white paper emphasized that all countries should be committed to equity and non-discrimination, respect each other's models of democracy, focus on its own efforts, and step up exchanges and mutual learning, seek common prosperity without abandoning one's own aspirations, and jointly work for progress of human civilization. When it comes to democracy, there is always room for improvement. China has achieved remarkable progress in growing its democracy, which still needs constant improvement. On the new journey to fully build a modern socialist country, the Communist Party of China will continue to hold high the banner of people's democracy, adhere to the people-centered development philosophy, firmly advance the whole process people's democracy, and work for new progress in democracy while promoting people's all-round development and common prosperity for all, so that the tree of democracy will thrive and remain forever green. The Chinese people will stand with people of all countries and advocate peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom, which are the common values of humanity. We will act in the spirit of mutual respect and seeking common ground while resolving differences, jointly enrich and develop humanity's political civilization, and work together for a community with a shared future for mankind. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Xi. We'll now open the floor for questions. Please identify your press unit, your media outlet, before asking the question. And there are many foreign journalists here. If you ask a question in English, it will be translated into Chinese. Now the floor is open. Thank you. From People's Daily. China is committed to the comprehensive leadership of the party, especially the unified collective leadership of the CPC Central Committee. What is the relationship between the party's leadership and the whole process, people's democracy?
The party's leadership, in essence, is supporting and ensuring the people's status as the masters of the country. Whole process people's democracy is a great creation of the party to lead and unite the people to pursue, realize, and develop democracy. It is a crystallization of the party's experience in promoting new innovations of theory, practice, and institution of China's democracy. Developing whole process people's democracy will enable more effective leadership of the party. It's fair to say that upholding the party's leadership and developing whole process people's democracy are highly compatible and mutually reinforcing. For one thing, upholding the party's leadership is a fundamental guarantee for whole process people's democracy. The CPC always represent the most broad-based people's fundamental interests in China. It does not have selfish interests and never represents any particular interest group, powerful people, or vested interests. It stands always firmly on the side of the people and rely firmly on the people for historic achievements. For a big country like us with 56 ethnic groups and 1.4 billion people, without the leadership of the party, especially the centralized, unified leadership of the Party Central Committee, copying the so-called Western democracy would easily lead to division and chaos, and democracy becomes everything it's not. Only by upholding the party's leadership can we steer democracy to the right direction and ensure that our people participate in the management of state affairs, economic and cultural undertakings, and social affairs via various ways in accordance with the law. For another thing, developing whole process people's democracy is an inherent requirement for upholding the party's leadership. It may pour the strengthened wisdom of the entirety of our people for the cause of the party and the nation, strengthen public support for the party's leadership, and promote more well-thought-out decisions of the party and more thorough implementation of the theory, lines, guidelines, and policies of the party. Thank you. Next question, please. Thank you. From 联合早报. I have two questions. Next week, the United States will hold the Summit on Democracy, and China emphasizes its whole process people's democracy. And today, we are releasing a white paper about it. Some say China and the United States are engaged in a rivalry of the voice over democracy. What's your take on that? Second question. In the second half of 2022, the CPC will hold its 20th National Congress, comprising of 2,300 seats. Could you share with the distribution of the seats? We'll give the floor to Mr. Xu Ling. Thank you for your question. Let me take the first one in the beginning. Sorry, let me take your second question first. We always believe that democracy is diverse. There is more than one path to democracy. The best one is the one that fits you the most. Like I just said, China's whole process people's democracy covers all aspects of the democratic process in all social settings. It's a true democracy that works. A socialist democracy that works. China's whole process people's democracy is rooted in China's history and culture. It befits our national conditions and draws upon the outstanding achievements of other civilizations. It's distinctively Chinese while reflecting the common values of the humanity, which is a new model of democracy for humanity that contributes China's wisdom and proposal for the development of democracy of the humanity. We're always of the view that for the various democratic forms in different countries, we should see them in an open and inclusive way and seek common ground and put aside differences. And for other countries' exploration and efforts to pursue democracy, we should fully respect these explorations and learn from one another. That is what democracy is really about. However, a few countries think they can lecture others over democracy. They adopt a hegemonic mentality that only copying their models is right and going one's own ways is wrong, and try to even exclude and suppress other forms of democracy and see them as undemocratic. But their moves in itself is undemocratic. With their own problematic democratic records and messy domestic governance, they think they can point fingers and criticize the democracy in other countries. Is that the democracy that they paint themselves as? The United States claims to be a leader of democracy and is going to convene and manipulate a summit on democracy, so to speak. It's actually an attempt to suppress and contain other countries with different social systems and development models. Such undemocratic moves disguised as democracy will be a joke in humanity's history of developing democracy and will only fail. And as to your second question, next year, the CPC will convene its 20th National Congress. Weeks ago, the CPC Central Committee published a notification on the election of delegates for the 20th National Congress. Head of the organization department was interviewed by the Xinhua News Agency over how the election would come about. And let me brief you on preparations. The Party Central Committee confirmed that there will be 2,300 seats. The allocation of the seats will be determined by the number of party organizations and members. While considering how seats were allocated in previous national congresses, the Party Central Committee highlighted the importance of ensuring the proportion of delegates at frontline of production and work, and in delegates from provincial organizations, central financial system, Beijing-based SOEs, frontline delegates must be no less than 1/3 of the total, and those holding leadership positions must take up no more than 2/3 of the seat. And there should be women representation. The share of women delegates from provincial organizations should generally be higher than the share of local women party members. In central and state departments, central financial system, and Beijing-based SOEs, as well as PLA and armed police, there should be a certain number of women delegates. All these requirements fully reflect intra-party democracy and broad-based representation, which enables delegates of the 20th Congress to better represent and reflect the will of all social sectors and every part of the society. Thank you. Next question, please. Thank you. From Godosha of Japan. May I ask about the specifics of China's system of democratic elections? What kind of people can be elected as deputies of the People's Congresses? And how do you elect community level, local and national level deputies? And how is it different from Western systems?
China practices the system of People's Congresses. This fundamental political system is about allowing the people to run the country. According to China's constitution, all state powers in China belong to the people. And the elections of people's deputies has two distinct features. One is that the Chinese citizens' right to elect is most broad-based. According to the Constitution, all Chinese citizens at above the age of 18 have the right to elect and to be elected, except those deprived of political rights in accordance with the law. Now the elections for the people's deputies at the county and the township levels are underway. More than 1 billion voters participated in the elections, and this is the most vivid practice of China's whole process people's democracy and the largest democratic election in the world. In Beijing, President Xi, as a voter of the Zhongnanhai constituency, solemnly cast his vote at the voting station at Huarentang. In Sichuan, a 106-year-old elderly cast his vote at a nearby ballot box. In Shanghai, there is this elderly couple. The husband is 90 years old and the wife 78 years old, and after they cast their vote, they showed their collection of 38 voters' certificates that belong to both of them, which span a period of 68 years. And the oldest one belonged to the husband, which dates back to 1953, when the new China held its first election of people's deputies. Second, China's deputies of People's Congresses are most representative. We have 5 levels of People's Congresses, from the national level to the county level. Altogether, there are 2.623 million people's deputies, including 2.478 million at the county and township level, accounting for 94.5%. They are elected directly by the voters. And deputies at the national, provincial, and municipal level are elected indirectly by those deputies at the lower level. And according to our election law, all the regions, ethnicities, and sectors must be represented by an appropriate number of deputies. For those at the primary level, especially workers, farmers, professionals, women, and ethnic minorities, there are clear numbers for those deputies. In China, every region, sector, industry, and ethnicity are represented by deputies. Take the 13th National People's Congress as an example. There are 742 women deputies, accounting for 24.9% of the total, 468 workers and farmers deputies, accounting for 15.7%, including 45 migrant workers. There are 613 professionals, accounting for 20.6% of the total, and 438 ethnic minority deputies, accounting for 14.7% of the total. All the 55 ethnic minorities in China are represented. Even those with a very small population would have at least one deputy. For example, the Menba ethnic group in Tibet, which only has a population of 10,000. It also has one deputy, which is a woman, a elementary school teacher. As for the difference of China's election and that of the Western countries, well, for example, if we look at the universality of the right to elect, our first election law has identified the universality of election rights. Well, it took Western countries several hundred years to realize universal suffrage in the sense of the law. China achieved that without all those twists and turns. As for turnout, since reform and opening up, China has conducted 12 direct elections at the township level and 11 direct elections at the county level, with turnouts at around 90%. And another example is the source of funding for the elections. In China, the funding comes from the treasury, and this mechanism ensures that money cannot taint the elections. Thank you. Next question, please. Thank you. On Phoenix TV, we know that the system of regional ethnic autonomy is an important part of socialist democratic system, but some in the international community think that the Chinese government has ever stricter management of those in the ethnic minorities. They have no real power of autonomy. What is your comment on that? Well, we all know that the system of regional ethnic autonomy is a basic political system in China. It is an important institutional safeguard for addressing the ethnic issues with Chinese characteristics. The system of regional ethnic autonomy means that the minority ethnicities under unified state leadership practice regional autonomy where they live in concentrated communities, set up organs of self-governance, and exercise the power of autonomy. So far, China has established 155 ethnic autonomous areas, including 5 autonomous regions, 30 autonomous prefectures, and 120 autonomous counties. 64% of China's territory is under regional ethnic autonomy. The system of regional ethnic autonomy is fundamentally aimed at upholding state unity and ethnic solidarity. The organs of self-governance in the ethnic autonomous areas are local administrations under the leadership of the central government. They must follow the leadership of the central authorities, ensure the central policies and orders are implemented smoothly, and that national laws and regulations are enforced. On this basis, they, in accordance with the law, ensure the equal rights of the various ethnicities, fulfill their obligations, support development of ethnicities, improve people's lives, achieve common development, common prosperity, and fully exercise their power of autonomy. Well, these powers include the right to legislate, the right of economic development, the right of fiscal management, the right to cultivate ethnic minority officials, the right to promote education and culture, the right to use their languages, etc. Take the right to cultivate and use ethnic minority officials as an example. The CPC and the Chinese government pay great attention to the cultivation of ethnic minority officials. After more than 70 years of efforts, we have cultivated a large group of ethnic minority officials who are excellent officials, and this provide important safeguard for implementing the system of regional ethnic autonomy. For the Standing Committee members of People's Congresses of the 155 ethnic autonomous areas, well, they all have citizens of the area's ethnic groups serve as director or deputy director of the Standing Committee. The chair, heads of prefectures or counties of ethnic autonomous areas are all citizens of local ethnic groups. Well, it has been proven that China's system of regional ethnic autonomy is good for unification of the country, solidarity among the ethnicities, and the stability of the society. It is also good for the progress of the ethnicities and the long-term security and stability of the country. In the 9 years from 2012 to 2020, the GDP of内蒙古, Guangxi, Tibet, and Xinjiang, and also Yunnan, Guizhou, and Qinghai have risen from 5.1 trillion yuan to 10.4 trillion yuan. The per capita GDP has grown from 27,000 yuan to 52,000 yuan. The urbanization rate has increased from 43.1% to 55.1%. All the 31.21 million people living in poor conditions in the ethnic regions have all been lifted out of poverty, and all the 420 state-level poor counties in the ethnic autonomous areas have all graduated and joined the rest of the country in achieving initial prosperity. Well, it is the Chinese people who can decide whether the system of regional ethnic autonomy works. And the concrete numbers and facts of progress of the ethnic minority areas and of the better life of the ethnic groups is the best and the most convincing answer. Next question, please. Thank you. With Guangming Daily, we know that the CPPCC system was established in 1949. What are the special features and the strengths of this institutional arrangement in China's democracy?
Thank you for your question. The CPPCC is a great creation in political institution for the party to lead other democratic parties, people with no party affiliations, civil groups, and people of all ethnicities and social sectors. It's deeply rooted in China's history and culture and an important format to realize China's people's democracy. In September 1949, the CPPCC National Committee convened its first plenary session, which symbolized the official establishment of the CPPCC system. Over the past 7 decades, led by the CPC, the CPPCC focused on unity and democracy, serving central task of the party and the nation, and played an important role in establishing and developing New China, exploring reforms, and realizing the Chinese dream. As socialism with Chinese characteristics enters a new era, the CPPCC, as an important channel of socialist consultative democracy and a specialized consultative organ, performs functions of consultation, oversight, participation, and cooperation to promote broad-based unity, advance multi-party cooperation and practice, the people's democracy. It's an important component of the state governance system of China and an institutional arrangement with Chinese characteristics. It has the following features and advantages as part of the Chinese democracy. First, it promotes well-calibrated and democratic decision-making through consultation. Consultation is carried out pre-decision and amid implementation through plenary meetings, meetings of the standing committees, chairman's meetings, specialized committees, thematic discussions, and seminars. Broad-based consultation is conducted over grand national policies, important social, economic issues and concerns of the people. For example, about the formulation and implementation of the 14th five-year plan, there have been active policy suggestions via CPPCC platforms. Over 220 reports were made, and more than 190 proposals were made to promote a full reflection of the CPPCC members' ideas and the will of all social sectors. Second, the consultation helps expand consensus and advances unity. Other democratic parties and people of all ethnicities and sectors participate in the CPPCC to deeply engage in policy deliberations and provide practical suggestions to align with the proposals of the CPC and publicize the party's policies for people of all ethnicities and sectors to dispel skepticism and boost confidence. For example, the 13th CPPCC National Committee helps provide suggestions over the eradication of absolute poverty as a way to implement the party central committee's decisions. By organizing the CPPCC members' lectures, site visits, and reading groups to tell China's stories in poverty alleviation well, they have deeply understood the CPC's starting mission and the great journey to build a moderately prosperous society in all respects and the institutional advantages of socialism or Chinese characteristics. Third, through consultation, the people's orderly political participation from all social sectors will be guaranteed. The CPPCC identifies 34 sectors covering 8 democratic parties and people of no party affiliations, major civil groups, 56 ethnicities, and 5 major religions. There are 3,200 plus CPPCC organizations at the national, provincial, municipal, and county levels with more than 600,000 members. Such a structure and distribution of sectors fully ensures the participation of people from every part of the society to participate in state affairs. The CPPCC supports consultation and discussions over state policies, and the members and democratic parties may speak about their opinions at the CPPCC on behalf of their parties and provide suggestions and make that is an institutional arrangement. It is an important form for the CPC to lead multi-party cooperation and political consultation. Thank you. Next question, please. From the routers, China's whole process people's democracy versus the American democracy, which one is better? Some analysts believe that American political figures must be held accountable if the voters think they don't do a well job after election and can replace the politicians in the next elections, while China's NPC deputies only respond to their superiors in the party, and the voters have nothing to do or vote them out upon election. What's your comment on that? Thank you. Democracy is historical, specific, and developing. Democracy of all countries are rooted in their respective history, culture, and traditions, and grows through the people's practice and creation. There are more than one way that leads to democracy. There are various kinds and forms of democracy. I believe the practices is most telling as we compare China's democracy with that of the United States, and the people are in the best position to judge. Under American democratic system, political figures represent particular interest groups instead of representing the interest promises. Yet after election, few of them live up to the promises. They, in surface, are subject to the supervision of the voters, but after election, the voters have to wait for the next elections to do something. And the democracy enters into hibernation after voting. They may make flashy slogans at campaign seasons, but the people are left with no voice after the elections. They may be courted at canvassing, but pushed aside after election. That is not real democracy, and Chinese people don't like or need a democracy like that. China's democracy is a whole process people's democracy led by the CPC. The party leaders and officials at all levels must accept all sectoral, multidimensional supervision of the party and the people, and serve for the benefits of the people with the rights the people conferred on them. No matter how their seniority and status, misconduct or breach of the law will be held accountable by party discipline and laws. No one comes as an exception. Our People's Congress deputies come from the people, represent and serve the people. They're elected by the people and held accountable by the people. They keep close connections with the people, listen to their voices and calls, and help them address pressing issues. They accept the people's supervision, and they are the true down-to-earth representatives of the people who observe social dynamics and pour wisdom. Violation of discipline and laws could end up with disqualifications or dismissal of the people or the voting units. They don't have to wait for the next elections. Such a democracy is more broad-based, authentic, and effective. The JFK School of Government at Harvard conducted 13 years of surveys, which showed that the Chinese people is 93% satisfied with the Chinese government under party leadership. I believe the people know the best about the comparison between Chinese and American democratic systems. Let me add a few observations. I agree with this answer that the sharp contrast pre-election and post-election in the United States is primarily because in the United States there are no political figures, including congressmen and women, who are subject to the supervision of the people. There is no such institutional or legal arrangement. Even when the voters are not happy, they have to wait for the next election in a few years. And there's a revolving door phenomena in the United States. So the congressmen and women represent certain interest groups and are swayed by the lobbyists. In contrast, in China, the election and representation law makes it clear that deputies at all levels must be subject to the voters and the voting units, who have the right to disqualify their deputies. The election law also stipulates the procedures for disqualification. The voters and the voting units are entitled to submit proposals for dismissal. Over 4 years of the 14th National People's Congress, 10 deputies were disqualified. In all, I want to say that the contrast between Chinese and American democracy is quite the opposite to your description. The Chinese deputies are strictly oversighted and looked over, and there are clear procedures for dismissal or disqualification, while in the United States, there's basically nothing of supervision after election. There's no such institutional arrangement, so we believe the Chinese whole process people's democracy has concrete institution and practices to ensure the voters and the voting units will keep a close eye on their deputies instead of making empty promises and left to oblivion after election. Thank you. Next question, please. Thank you from China News Agency. The community-level people's autonomy, could you expound on that? And how do the villages and residents committee play their autonomous functions?
Thank you for your interest in the system of community-level self-governance. Well, this is a basic political system of China. The Constitution makes it clear that residents committees, and the villages committees established among urban and rural residents on the basis of their place of residence are primary level people's organizations for self-governance. So it is under the leadership of the CPC committees of the local communities that they exercise their power of self-governance, and they would exercise self-management, self-service, self-education, and self-oversight on the governance of urban and rural communities, public affairs, and work for public good. There are 492,000 villages committees and 160,000 residents committees. And these committees are established through elections of the villages or residents. As for how they exercise their power of self-governance, well, first, they can organize democratic consultation. The villages or residents committees could organize the villages and the residents to have brainstorming about what committees can do, how to improve the sanitation of their communities, how to help the vulnerable members of the communities, and how to spend their budget. They will solicit opinions from the members of the communities and come up with a list of things to do. Second, on the basis of consultation, they will make democratic decisions in this process, mainly through the meetings of the villagers or urban residents or their representatives. They will make decisions on the work of the committees and come up with a final resolution. And third, they would organize the residents to formulate or revise chapters or rules or arrangements for self-governance so that the residents can have a common code of conduct. Fourth, the residents can be organized to supervise the work of the members of the committees and also carry out reviews of their work performance. All the proceedings and the results of the committees are open to the public, which can be published on online platforms and physical platforms so as to ensure thorough oversight of their work. Well, this system of community-level self-governance not only ensures that people can exercise their powers of self-governance. It could also help us address major challenges and risks. For example, in responding to COVID-19, in a vast country like China with a huge population, there is a huge, enormous pressure on the communities to contain COVID-19. And the committees of those communities have effectively organized the people to prevent the spread of the virus among the communities. So this system has demonstrated the strength of its system with Chinese characteristics. Thank you. Next question. Democracy means oversight of public powers. And if we look at the cases of corruption in China in recent years, this seems still a serious problem. What is your comment? I'm happy to take your question. Corruption is a historical and social phenomenon common to human society and it exists in all countries. Corruption is the antithesis of our party's nature and purpose. Since the founding of the CPC has always been fighting corruption. Before the party's 18th Congress, corruption has been quite prominent or pronounced in China. And we have realized after the 18th Party Congress that corruption is the greatest threat to our party's long-term governance. It is a major political fight that cannot and should not be lost. We'd rather offend thousands rather than letting the 1.4 billion people down. So we're committed to a comprehensive zero-tolerance crackdown on corruption that emphasizes containment, high pressure, and long-term deterrence. And we have achieved overwhelming victory in the fight against corruption. That said, we realize that corruption has not been rooted out. Some sectors are still susceptible to corruption, and we still face a tough fight ahead, which allows no let-up. We are committed to ensuring that officials dare not, cannot, and do not want to commit corruption, and will take strong measures to cement the victory in fighting corruption, to exercise oversight over public powers and prevent its abuse is an important function of democracy. Since the 18th Party Congress, we emphasized that public power is for public use, not for private purposes. And we need to define, regulate, constrain the powers and put them in the cage of institution, strengthen oversight of public powers, and advance reform and institutional development of major supervision institutions in the priority areas to prevent misuse and abuse of powers. We have ensured that democratic oversight will run through the whole process of the use of power and fully average the important role of democratic supervision in preventing corruption and reduced the cases of corruption and contained the increase of corruption cases. A lot of the corruption comes to light during the inspections and through the letters submitted by the people. The fact that corruptions have been punished does not mean the failure of democratic oversight. It actually points to the effective role of the democratic oversight, and we believe that the oversight over corruption would only get stronger, and the corrupt officials will have no place in China. Thank you. We know that at the community level, the primary level, people's congresses are directly elected, while those above those levels are indirectly elected. Will this drown out the voice and opinions of the vulnerable groups?
The People's Congress system is the most important, one of the most important systems for the whole process people's democracy. Whether community level, the basic level, or national level, deputies come from the people, live among the people, and are down to earth. Moreover, after being elected, the deputies do not leave their original jobs. They live as a member of the ordinary public. Such an institutional arrangement is very effective. It covers all residence compounds, villages, and deputies regularly meet with the general public to heed their concerns. Such an institutional arrangement makes sure that the deputies are not professional politicians. They do not represent any certain interest groups. They faithfully and directly feel for and reflect the will of the people and reflect their and provide their opinions and suggestions to the state organs. At the annual NPC meetings, close to 3,000 deputies submit thousands of opinions and suggestions. And during the 14th NPC, deputies provide 8,300 plus suggestions, which are mostly about livelihood issues, such as lightening pressure for students at compulsory education periods, improving elderly care in rural areas, rural toilet revolution, classification of garbage, and improving social security for delivery workers and others on flexo jobs. They bear on the people's aspirations for a better life, reflect the cause of the people, and shows that the deputies fulfill their responsibilities to observe social dynamics, pull the wisdom of the public to the benefit of the people. The state organs are required to handle their suggestions carefully in accordance with the law and absorb reasonable suggestions in the course of policy making and practices to actively respond to the concerns of the society so that every call of the people is aptly responded to. From Global Times, some people call themselves model of democracy yet perform badly in COVID-19 response with messy social governance. It seems their statement doesn't meet with the facts. What's the function of democracy? How do we judge democracy? What are the criteria? Thank you. Democracy is not an ornament or for window dressing. It must be used to address the people's concerns. Authentic democracy reflects the cause of the people and meets their needs. It allows for diverse expression of opinions and suggestions and forms collective will of the people. It spurs social creativity and vitality at maximum and effectively uphold social fairness and justice. Over the years, the United States painted itself as a model of democracy for the world, yet in the face of COVID-19, American democratic system exposes countless flaws. In its COVID-19 response, due to severe political polarization, partisan bickering, and divergent implementation at different levels, and dysfunctioning social oversight, the response was ineffective, leading to over 40 million infections and over 700,000 deaths. Such a democracy brings not happiness but catastrophe to the voters. Facing the same pandemic, our party and nation put people and life first. Identify the top priority to be the people's life and health. We make decisive decisions and launched the people's overall war to combat the pandemic. Using our institutional advantages, we have mobilized the grand rescue of lives with unprecedented scale. Nationwide systems were built to mobilize all the resources and unite all the hearts. We make every effort to treat the patients with no one left out. We do not give on every patient, from infants to centenarians. Every measure was made to save their lives. This reflects the respect and protection of every life by the Chinese democratic system. General Secretary Xi Jinping already gave clear answers over how to judge whether a country's political system is democratic and effective. That is, it depends on whether the state leadership could be transferred in an orderly way in accordance with the law, whether the people could participate in state affairs and social affairs and manage social, cultural and economic undertakings in accordance with the law, whether the people have smooth channels to express their needs, whether all social sectors participate in the political life, whether the state decisions are well thought out and democratically made, and whether talent of all social sectors could enter the state leadership and the cadre system via fair competition, and whether the governing party fulfills the leadership of the state affairs in accordance with constitution and legal regulations, whether the exercise of power are effectively oversighted. History shows that Chinese democracy is effective in China, and history will prove again that the Chinese democracy will thrive under the CPC leadership.
Because of with CGTN, because of China's growing strength, China is exporting its model to the world, posing a threat and challenge to democracies of the world. What is your comment? Thank you for your question. First, I would like to point out that the so-called concept of democracies of the world is a pseudo-concept concocted by a few countries. Democracy is the common value of humanity and a shared treasure or asset of human political civilization. Democracy is the right of people of all countries, not the patent of a small number of countries. Whether a country is democratic or not should be decided by the people of that country. As for which countries are democracies in the international community, it should be collectively decided by the international community. Just as Mr. Tian Peiyan said, certain countries have failed in fighting COVID-19 and failed in its domestic governance. It suffers from polar politics and is bullying other countries in other parts of the world, yet it still proclaimed itself as a model of democracy and beacon of democracy. Isn't that preposterous? Now, the humanity's cause of democracy is at a crossroads of whether to move forward or backward. And certain countries are stoking confrontation and division in the world in the name of democracy. They have intensified the tensions in the world and become a source of instability. I believe people can tell for themselves who is a threat to humanity's democracy and who is a challenge to world peace and development. Well, democracy is an ideal always cherished by the Communist Party of China and the Chinese people. And I have elaborated on that when briefing you on the white paper, and the other speakers have also expressed their views on this matter. Well, when it comes to democracy, China has the confidence in its democracy. China has actively responded to people's expectations and aspirations for democracy. We have developed a whole process people's democracy and a democratic system that covers more than 9.6 million square kilometers of land, more than 1.4 billion people, and 56 ethnicities. which involves the most extensive participation of the largest population. As Mr. Guo mentioned, the elections of people's deputies are being held at the county and the townships level. More than 1 billion voters participated in this process. Since reform and opening up, China has held 12 direct elections at the county level for people's deputies and 11 direct elections at the county level, with a turnout rate at around 90%. This is a true reflection of China's democracy. And all these paint a true picture of China's democracy and shows that it is the people who run the country in China. China promotes whole process people's democracy at home and advocates greater democracy in international relations. We believe that all countries are equal, regardless of their size, strength, and wealth. China does not blindly copy other countries' political systems, nor will we ask other countries to copy China's model. We always believe that the world is a diverse and colorful place, and democracy comes in diverse forms. Every country has the right to choose its own path of democratic development, and China is ready to increase communication and mutual learning with other countries and jointly promote progress in humanity's political civilization. Well, thank you, all the speakers and all the journalists, for attending today's press conference. With that, today's conference, thank you.